Kevin Simpson enters the opulent chambers of Cleo, the Acamarian High Counselor, his heart racing but his steps steady. The human diplomat knows this encounter could change everything for his enslaved species. Cleo, a vision of alien beauty with iridescent skin and piercing violet eyes, sits on her ornate throne, regarding Kevin with unconcealed disdain. The air crackles with tension as Kevin approaches. Cleo's guards, hulking figures with scaled armor, tense their muscles, ready to remove the pathetic human at a moment's notice. Kevin feels their hostile gazes boring into him, but he doesn't falter. He has a mission, and failure is not an option. Earth lies conquered, its people subjected to the harsh rule of the technologically superior Acamarians. Kevin, chosen for his charisma and negotiation skills, carries the weight of humanity's hopes on his shoulders. He's here to plead for better treatment of human laborers, but he knows begging won't work. He needs to captivate, to intrigue, to seduce. As Kevin reaches the foot of Cleo's throne, he surprises everyone by initiating a traditional Acamarian greeting ritual. His movements are fluid, precise, displaying an intimate knowledge of their customs that catches Cleo off guard. Her violet eyes widen, a flicker of interest replacing the contempt. Kevin's voice, strong and clear, fills the chamber as he launches into a spirited debate about interspecies relations. His arguments are well-crafted, showcasing his intellect and wit. Cleo finds herself drawn in, engaging with the human on topics of philosophy, art, and politics. The meeting, intended to be brief, stretches on for hours. Cleo leans forward on her throne, her iridescent skin shimmering with excitement as she matches Kevin's verbal prowess. Her advisors exchange worried glances, unprepared for this turn of events. As the discussion progresses, Cleo becomes visibly flustered. Her cheeks flush a deeper shade of blue, her breathing quickens. She's attracted to Kevin, both intellectually and physically, much to her own surprise and the shock of her advisors. Kevin seizes this unexpected advantage, deftly steering the conversation towards the plight of human workers. He presents compelling arguments, backed by data and emotional appeals that resonate with Cleo's newfound respect for him. By the time Kevin prepares to leave, he's successfully negotiated better conditions for human laborers. But there's more. Cleo, caught up in the moment, impulsively invites him to a private dinner the following evening. The chamber falls silent, all eyes on the High Counselor and the human who has so thoroughly captivated her. As Kevin bows and exits, his mind races. This unexpected turn of events could alter the balance of power between humans and Acamarians. His superiors in the human resistance movement, monitoring the situation from afar, see an opportunity. They realize Kevin's newfound connection with Cleo could be the key to gathering crucial intelligence and potentially overthrowing Acamarian rule. Kevin steps out of the chamber, his heart pounding with a mix of triumph and anticipation. He's opened a door, but what lies beyond it remains to be seen. The fate of humanity now rests on his ability to maintain this delicate dance of diplomacy and seduction with the most powerful Acamarian in the galaxy. Kevin's mind raced as he left the High Counselor's chambers. His pulse still quickened from the unexpected turn of events. The invitation to a private dinner with Cleo hung in the air like a tantalizing promise, filled with both opportunity and danger. The following evening, Kevin found himself standing before the ornate doors of Cleo's personal quarters. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. As the doors slid open, he was greeted by a sight that momentarily took his breath away. Cleo's quarters were a marvel of alien architecture and design. Bioluminescent plants cast a soft, ethereal glow across the room, their tendrils swaying gently in an unseen breeze. The walls shimmered with a pearlescent sheen, reminiscent of Cleo's own iridescent skin. The High Counselor herself stood by a table, laden with exotic dishes, her violet eyes fixed on Kevin. "Welcome, Kevin Simpson," she said, her voice carrying a hint of warmth that had been absent in their previous encounter. Kevin bowed slightly, performing another flawless Acamarian greeting. "Thank you for your gracious invitation, High Counselor." "Please, in these chambers, you may call me Cleo," she replied, gesturing for him to take a seat. As they began their meal, Kevin's senses were assaulted by an array of flavors and textures, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Carefully, he steered their conversation towards the topic of human-Acamarian relations. "I must admit, Cleo, I'm curious about the history between our species," Kevin said, his tone casual yet probing. "How did the Acamarians first view humans?" Cleo's expression softened as she recounted tales of first contact and the subsequent conquest of Earth. Kevin listened intently, filing away every piece of information that could be useful to the resistance. As the evening progressed, their discussion grew more intimate. Kevin found himself genuinely engrossed in Cleo's insights into Acamarian culture and politics. He learned of internal power struggles within the High Council, of technological advancements that had given the Acamarians their edge in interstellar warfare. Cleo, in turn, seemed equally fascinated by Kevin's perspective on human resilience and adaptability. Her initial disdain for humans had given way to a grudging respect, tinged with something deeper. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same piece of fruit, sending an electric jolt through both of them. Kevin's breath caught in his throat as he looked up to meet Cleo's gaze. Her violet eyes were wide, pupils dilated, a deeper shade of blue coloring her cheeks. For a moment they remained frozen, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. Then, as if coming to her senses, Cleo pulled back, clearing her throat. I would like to show you our capital city," she said, her usual composure slightly shaken. "Would you join me for a tour tomorrow?" Kevin nodded, his heart racing. "It would be my honor, Cleo." As he left her quarters later that night, Kevin's mind was a whirlwind of emotions and calculations. He had gathered invaluable intelligence, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted between him and the Acamarian High Counselor. The next morning found Kevin in a secret meeting with Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Resistance. The underground bunker was a far cry from the opulence of Cleo's quarters, its stark walls a reminder of the harsh reality facing humanity. "This is our chance, Kevin," Chen said, her eyes gleaming with fierce perseverance. "You need to exploit this connection with Cleo, get access to their restricted facilities, their advanced tech. It could be the key to our liberation." Kevin nodded, pushing down the conflicting emotions roiling in his gut. "I understand, Commander. I won't let you down." As he stepped out into the alien sunlight to meet Cleo for their tour, Kevin tried to focus on his mission. But when he saw her waiting for him, resplendent in her official robes, he felt a now familiar flutter in his chest. The day passed in a blur of new sights and experiences. Cleo led Kevin through grand plazas and towering spires, explaining the intricacies of Acamarian architecture and governance. At each stop, Kevin carefully noted security measures and potential weaknesses, all while maintaining an air of genuine interest. In a secluded garden filled with alien flora of impossible beauty, Cleo turned to Kevin with an uncharacteristically vulnerable expression. "I must confess, Kevin, you have challenged my perceptions of humans." Their faces drew closer, the air between them charged with anticipation. Just as their lips were about to meet, a sharp beep from Cleo's communication device shattered the moment. Her security detail materialized seemingly out of nowhere, reminding them both of their respective positions. The tour culminated in a visit to the High Council chambers, where Kevin witnessed a heated debate on human rights. To his surprise, Cleo argued passionately for more lenient treatment of humans, citing their potential as partners rather than mere subjects. As the day drew to a close, they found themselves on a balcony overlooking the sprawling alien cityscape. The twin moons of the Acamarian homeworld hung low in the sky, casting everything in a surreal silvery light. Unable to resist any longer, Kevin and Cleo's lips met in a passionate kiss. For a moment, the complexities of their situation melted away, leaving only the connection between them. Unknown to the entwined couple, hidden cameras captured their intimate moment, transmitting the footage to Zorak, Cleo's rival on the High Council. In his private chambers, Zorak watched the feed with a twisted smile, seeing in it the means to discredit Cleo and seize power for himself. As Kevin returned to his quarters that night, his head spun with the day's events. He had gathered crucial intelligence for the resistance, but at what cost? The genuine feelings he had developed for Cleo warred with his duty to humanity. Across the city, in her opulent chambers, Cleo lay awake, her thoughts consumed by the human diplomat who had so thoroughly upended her world. She began to contemplate using her position to improve human-Acamarian relations, to create a future where their species could coexist as equals. Her musings were interrupted by an urgent message flashing on her communication device. Zorak had called for an emergency session of the High Council, citing grave concerns about leadership loyalty. As Cleo rose to face this new challenge, and Kevin prepared his report for Commander Chen, neither could have foreseen the far-reaching consequences their actions would have for both their species. As dawn broke over the Acamarian capital, the tranquility was shattered by an urgent message that flashed across Cleo's communication device. Her rival, Zorak, had called for an emergency session of the High Council, citing grave concerns about leadership loyalty. Cleo's heart raced as she quickly dressed in her formal robes. She knew this was more than a routine meeting. It was a direct challenge to her authority. As she hurried through the corridors of the government complex, her mind whirled with possibilities. How much did Zorak know? What evidence did he have? Meanwhile, Kevin was jolted awake by a frantic knock on his door. A member of the human resistance ushered him to an underground bunker where Commander Sarah Chen awaited. Her face was grim as she briefed him on the unfolding political turmoil. "This is our chance, Kevin," Chen said, her voice low and urgent. "While the Acamarians are distracted by their internal power struggle, we need you to infiltrate their central data hub. The information stored there could be the key to our liberation." Kevin nodded, pushing aside his conflicting emotions about Cleo. "What's the plan?" As Chen outlined the details of the covert operation, the High Council chambers were filling with tense, murmuring Acamarians. Cleo took her place at the center, her posture rigid, her face a mask of calm. Zorak's eyes gleamed with malice as he addressed the council. "Esteemed colleagues, I bring before you evidence of a grave security breach at the highest level of our government." With a dramatic flourish, he activated a large view screen. The chamber fell silent as footage of Cleo and Kevin's intimate moments played out for all to see. Gasps and angry mutters filled the air. Cleo felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She struggled to maintain her composure as Zorak's voice droned on, twisting her actions into a narrative of betrayal and weakness. High Counselor Cleo has not only fraternized with a member of an inferior species, but has also shared sensitive information, potentially compromising our entire civilization. Cleo rose to her feet, her voice ringing out clear and strong despite her inner turmoil. "Esteemed colleagues, I assure you that my interactions with the human diplomat have been in the best interests of our people. Through our discussions, I have gained valuable insights into human culture and psychology, which can only benefit our rule." Her words seemed to fall on deaf ears as more council members turned against her, their faces contorted with disgust and anger. As the political drama unfolded in the council chambers, Kevin was putting his knowledge of Acamarian security systems to the test. He moved swiftly through the government complex, his heart pounding with each close call. Finally, he reached the central data hub. His fingers flew over the alien interface, initiating the download of crucial information. As the progress bar crept forward, a chill ran down his spine. A silent alarm had been triggered. Back in the council chambers, Zorak's voice rose triumphantly. "I call for a vote of no confidence in Cleo's leadership." Cleo's mind raced. She knew she was losing ground fast. In a moment of desperation, she recalled an ancient Acamarian law, one rarely invoked but still valid. "I invoke the right of Korthala," she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. The chamber fell silent, all eyes on her. "I choose to be represented by a champion in trial by combat." Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. Zorak's smug expression faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. "And who, pray tell, would you choose as your champion?" Cleo's violet eyes blazed with persistence. "I name Kevin Simpson, the human diplomat, as my champion." The council erupted into pandemonium. Zorak bellowed orders to his guards, demanding Kevin's immediate arrest. Kevin, unaware of the drama unfolding in the council chambers, was focused on escaping the data hub. He ducked into an alcove, barely avoiding a patrol of Acamarian guards. As he caught his breath, he overheard a fragment of their communication. human named Kevin Simpson, to be arrested on sight. High Counselor Cleo's champion. Kevin's mind reeled. Champion? What had Cleo done? He glanced at the data device in his hand, knowing the information it contained could change everything for humanity. But Cleo's act of faith in him tugged at his heart. In that moment, Kevin made a choice that would alter the course of human-Acamarian relations forever. He tucked the data device securely in his pocket and turned back towards the council chambers. As Kevin burst through the doors, the entire assembly froze. Cleo's eyes widened, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over her face. Zorak's features contorted with rage. "Arrest him!" Zorak shouted. "He's a spy!" Kevin stood his ground, his gaze locked with Cleo's. "I accept the role of champion," he declared, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. As Acamarian guards moved to subdue him, Kevin's hand brushed against the data device in his pocket. He knew that even now the information was being transmitted to the human resistance. Whatever happened next, humanity had gained a powerful advantage. The air crackled with tension as Kevin faced down the approaching guards. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with Kevin and Cleo at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape the galaxy. Galaxy forever. The tension in the council chambers was palpable as Kevin stood his ground, surrounded by hostile Acamarian guards. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" It was Kelthor, the eldest member of the High Council. "If the human accepts the role of champion, then by our ancient laws, we must honor the right of Korthala." Zorak's face contorted with rage, but he knew better than to openly defy such a sacred tradition. "Very well," he spat. "Let the trial by combat commence." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparations. Kevin was led to a chamber where he was outfitted with lightweight Acamarian armor, its iridescent surface molding to his body like a second skin. A weapons master presented him with an array of alien weaponry, explaining the function of each with curt efficiency. As Kevin selected a slim, curved blade that hummed with energy, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished surface. The face that stared back at him was one he barely recognized, determined, focused, and undeniably changed by his experiences on this alien world. The arena was a vast circular expanse, its perimeter lined with towering crystalline structures that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. As Kevin stepped onto the sandy floor, the roar of the Acamarian spectators washed over him like a physical force. He scanned the crowd, his eyes locking with Cleo's for a brief charged moment before he turned to face his opponent. Zorak entered from the opposite side, his massive frame encased in ornate battle armor. He wielded a wicked-looking weapon, part sword, part energy projector, with practiced ease. The Acamarian's eyes gleamed with predatory anticipation as he stalked towards Kevin. A piercing tone signaled the start of the combat, and Zorak wasted no time in pressing his advantage. He lunged forward with frightening speed, his weapon arcing through the air in a deadly blur. Kevin barely managed to parry the blow, the impact sending shockwaves up his arm. For several minutes, Kevin found himself on the defensive, retreating and dodging as Zorak unleashed a relentless assault. The Acamarian's superior strength and alien physiology gave him a clear edge, each of his strikes powerful enough to end the fight in an instant. But as the battle wore on, Kevin began to notice something. There was a pattern to Zorak's attacks, a rhythm he could almost feel. The human's agility and quick thinking allowed him to stay just ahead of his opponent's strikes, and he started to see openings in Zorak's defenses. Seizing an opportunity, Kevin feinted left before spinning to the right, his blade slicing across Zorak's unprotected flank. The Acamarian roared in pain and fury, his attacks becoming wilder and less coordinated. The tide of the battle began to turn. Kevin's smaller size and greater maneuverability allowed him to dance around Zorak's increasingly desperate swings. He landed a series of quick, precise strikes, each one further enraging his opponent and throwing him off balance. The arena had fallen silent, the spectators watching in stunned disbelief as the human held his own against one of their mightiest warriors. Kevin could feel the weight of their stares, the collective intake of breath as he narrowly avoided a vicious swipe from Zorak's weapon. In a move born of desperation, Zorak activated his weapon's energy projector, sending a searing beam of light towards Kevin. The human dove enrolled, feeling the heat of the blast as it passed mere inches above him. As he came up into a crouch, he saw his opening. With a burst of speed, Kevin closed the distance between them. He ducked under Zorak's guard and brought his blade up in a swift, decisive arc. The weapon connected with the power source of Zorak's armor, sending sparks flying and causing the Akamarian to stumble backwards. Kevin pressed his advantage, his blade a blur of motion as he drove Zorak to his knees. The Akamarian's weapon clattered to the ground, and Kevin stood over him, his blade poised for the killing blow. Time seemed to stand still as Kevin looked into Zorak's eyes, seeing fear and disbelief warring with stubborn pride. The human's chest heaved with exertion, his muscles trembling from the strain of the fight. He knew that this moment would define not just his fate, but potentially the future of human-Akamarian relations. Just as Kevin's arm tensed to deliver the final strike, a voice rang out across the arena. "Stop!" All eyes turned to see Cleo striding onto the battlefield, her robes billowing behind her. She raised her hands, addressing the stunned crowd. "This combat has proven the worth of humanity. Kevin Simpson has demonstrated skill, bravery, and honor that rival our greatest warriors. I call for an end to this trial." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Cleo approached Kevin and Zorak. She placed a hand on Kevin's shoulder, her touch sending a jolt through his battle-weary body. "You have fought with valor," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "But now, let us put aside our weapons and seek a new path forward." Kevin lowered his blade, his eyes never leaving Cleo's. In that moment, amid the swirling dust and fading adrenaline of combat, he saw a future taking shape, one where humans and Akamarians might stand together as equals. But as Cleo turned to address the High Council, Kevin's hand brushed against the data device hidden in his armor. He was suddenly reminded of the larger conflict at play and the choices that lay ahead. The battle in the arena might be over, but the real challenge was just beginning. The battle in the arena might be over, but the real challenge was just beginning. In the days that followed, Kevin and Cleo found themselves thrust into a whirlwind of diplomatic negotiations. The High Council, shaken by the outcome of the trial by combat, grudgingly agreed to open discussions with the human resistance. As preparations for their journey to Earth began, Kevin felt a mix of anticipation and dread. He knew that the fate of both species hung in the balance. The sleek Akamarian ship cut through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced technology making the journey smooth and swift. Kevin stood at the viewport, watching his home planet grow larger, a swirling blue and green orb marred by the scars of war and Akamarian terraforming attempts. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Encountering unexpected atmospheric turbulence. Brace for impact." Kevin's stomach lurched as the ship plummeted. He reached for Cleo, pulling her close as they were thrown against the bulkhead. With a deafening crash, the vessel slammed into the ground, skidding to a halt in a remote forested area. As the dust settled, Kevin groaned, pushing himself up from the twisted metal. "Cleo, are you all right?" She emerged from the wreckage, her violet skin marred with cuts but her eyes alert. "I'm functional. The ship's communication systems are damaged. We're isolated." Kevin surveyed their surroundings. Dense vegetation pressed in on all sides, unlike anything he remembered from before the invasion. "We need to move. This crash will have attracted attention, and not the kind we want." They salvaged what they could from the ship, a few rations, Cleo's personal data pad, and some basic survival gear. As they ventured into the alien landscape, Kevin's survival training kicked in. He led them to a nearby stream, knowing that following it downstream would likely lead to civilization. The forest was eerily quiet, punctuated only by the occasional rustle or snap of branches. As they pushed through the undergrowth, Kevin noticed strange, luminescent fungi clinging to the trees. "The Akamarian terraforming," he muttered. "It's changed everything." Cleo studied the organisms with fascination. "Our scientists never anticipated this level of mutation. The ecosystem has adapted in ways we never predicted." As night fell, they sought shelter in a small cave. Kevin worked to start a fire while Cleo used her datapad to analyze their surroundings. The orange glow of the flames cast dancing shadows on the cave walls, creating an intimate atmosphere. Kevin? Cleo's voice was hesitant. I've been thinking about what happened in the arena. About us. He met her gaze, feeling the familiar pull of attraction. Cleo, A bone-chilling howl cut through the night, startling them both. Kevin grabbed a makeshift spear, moving to the cave entrance. In the moonlight, he saw a pack of creatures unlike anything he'd ever seen, wolf-like, but with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. Stay back, he warned Cleo, hefting the spear. The creatures circled, their movements unnaturally fluid. Kevin's heart raced as he faced down the alien predators. Just as they tensed to spring, Cleo activated a device on her wrist. A high-pitched whine filled the air, causing the creatures to yelp and retreat into the darkness. Acamarian sonic repeller, she explained, a hint of pride in her voice. It seems effective against earth fauna as well. As dawn broke, they continued their journey. The terrain became increasingly treacherous, with steep ravines and fast-flowing rivers blocking their path. Kevin's knowledge of Earth's geography proved invaluable as he navigated them through the changed landscape. On the third day, they stumbled upon the ruins of a human settlement. Overgrown and abandoned, it stood as a stark reminder of the war's toll. As they searched for supplies, Kevin felt a pang of guilt. This could have been his home, his people. In a partially collapsed building, they made a startling discovery. Hidden beneath layers of debris was a cache of advanced technology, human-made, but clearly designed to counter Acamarian systems. This is incredible, Kevin breathed, examining a device that pulsed with energy. The Resistance must have been working on this in secret. Cleo's expression was a mix of awe and concern. This could change everything, Kevin. If your people have found a way to neutralize our technology... Their eyes met, the weight of their discovery hanging between them. In that moment, the lines between duty and personal feelings blurred. Kevin stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible force. Cleo's breath hitched as his hand cupped her cheek. Their lips met in a desperate, passionate kiss. Years of tension and unspoken desire poured out as they clung to each other. For a brief, shining moment, there was no war, no divided loyalties, just two beings finding solace in each other's arms. As they broke apart, breathless, reality came crashing back. Kevin's hand brushed against the data device hidden in his pocket, a stark reminder of the secrets he still carried. We should move on, he said, his voice rough with emotion. We need to get this information to the Resistance. Cleo nodded, her eyes still searching his face. As they gathered their supplies and the newfound technology, neither of them noticed the small, camouflaged drone that hovered silently in the shadows, its lens focused on their every move. Miles away in a hidden Acamarian outpost, Zorak watched the footage with a cruel smile. So, the traitors survived, he hissed. No matter. Soon they'll wish they hadn't. He turned to a group of elite soldiers, their armor gleaming in the low light. Find them. Eliminate them. Leave no trace. As Kevin and Cleo pressed on towards the human settlement, unaware of the danger closing in, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The information they carried, the bond they shared, and the forces aligned against them would shape the future of human-Acamarian relations in ways they could scarcely imagine. As they crested a hill, Kevin and Cleo caught their first glimpse of New Denver's imposing walls in the distance. The sight of the human stronghold filled Kevin with a mixture of relief and apprehension. We made it, he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. Cleo nodded, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Yes, but our journey is far from finished. As they approached the outskirts of the city, movement caught Kevin's eye. A group of armed figures emerged from the cover of a nearby tree line, their weapons trained on the approaching pair. Halt! A woman's voice rang out, clear and authoritative. Identify yourselves. Kevin raised his hand slowly, motioning for Cleo to do the same. I'm Kevin Simpson, former Resistance operative. This is Cleo, an Acamarian diplomat. We come seeking asylum and bearing critical information. The patrol leader, a stern-faced woman with close-cropped hair and a lieutenant's insignia, stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed as she took in Cleo's alien features. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, she introduced herself, her weapon still at the ready. You'll understand if we're a bit cautious about an Acamarian at our doorstep. Kevin nodded. Of course, but I assure you, Cleo is an ally. We've been through hell to get here. Rodriguez studied them for a moment before lowering her weapon slightly. We'll let Commander Chen make that call. You'll both be taken into custody and escorted to headquarters. Any sudden moves and we won't hesitate to use force. Understood? Understood, Kevin and Cleo replied in unison. The patrol surrounded them, and they began the tense journey into New Denver. As they passed through the massive gates, Kevin marveled at the transformation of the city. What had once been a sprawling metropolis was now a fortress, its buildings reinforced and repurposed for war. At the Resistance headquarters, a converted skyscraper at the heart of the city, Kevin and Cleo were brought before Commander Sarah Chen. The commander's office was Spartan, dominated by holographic displays showing troop movements and defense grids. Chen's eyes widened in recognition as Kevin entered. Simpson, we thought you were dead. Kevin managed a weary smile. It was a close call, Commander, but we've brought information that could turn the tide of this war. Over the next hour, Kevin and Cleo briefed Commander Chen on their harrowing journey, the assassination attempt, and the groundbreaking human technology they had discovered. Chen listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute. If what you're saying is true, Chen said, pacing behind her desk, this could change everything. Dr. Hawkins! A holographic display flickered to life, revealing the face of a bespectacled woman with wild graying hair. Yes, Commander? I'm sending you some data. I need your team to analyze it immediately. Priority Alpha. As Dr. Hawkins acknowledged the order, Chen turned back to Kevin and Cleo. Now, there's something you both need to know. The Akamarian homeworld is in chaos. Rumors of your death, she nodded to Cleo, have sparked a power struggle. Zorak is making a play for control. Cleo's face paled. That traitor! I must contact the High Council immediately. I can use my communication implant to... Her words were cut short by a deafening alarm. Red lights flashed throughout the command center as panicked voices filled the air. Commander, a technician shouted. Multiple Akamarian ships entering Earth's orbit. It's a full-scale invasion force. Chen's face hardened. How long until they're in range? Minutes, ma'am. They're moving fast. Kevin stepped forward, his mind racing. Commander, if we can integrate the countermeasures we found into our defense systems, we might have a chance. Chen nodded sharply. Do it. Dr. Hawkins, you heard the man. Get your team on it now. As the Resistance scrambled to prepare their defenses, Cleo's eyes blazed with tenacity. I have a plan, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. We need to infiltrate Zorak's command ship. I can use my override codes to bypass their security. Kevin turned to her, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. It's too dangerous. You can't go alone. She won't, Chen interjected. Simpson, you're going with her. Take the captured Akamarian shuttle in Hangar 3. If you can destabilize their command structure, it might buy us the time we need. As Kevin and Cleo prepared for their daring mission, the sound of distant explosions rocked the building. Through the windows, they could see Akamarian bombers descending on the city's outer defenses. We need to move, Kevin said, checking his weapon. Cleo nodded, her hand brushing against Kevin's for a brief moment. Whatever happens up there, she said softly, I want you to know. Another explosion, closer this time, cut off her words. They shared a look of understanding before racing towards the hangar. As they boarded the shuttle, Kevin's hands flew over the controls, bringing the alien craft to life. The hangar doors opened, revealing a sky filled with streaks of light from energy weapons and anti-aircraft fire. Here goes nothing, Kevin muttered, pushing the throttle forward. The shuttle shot out of the hangar, climbing rapidly towards the Akamarian fleet looming above. As they ascended, Kevin could see the human defenses in action, their newly enhanced weapons tearing through Akamarian shields with surprising effectiveness. It's working, Cleo said, her eyes wide as she watched the battle unfold below. Kevin nodded grimly. Let's hope our luck holds. We're about to need it. The shuttle accelerated towards Zorak's massive command ship, its silhouette growing larger with each passing second. Kevin's heart pounded as they approached, knowing that their entire mission, and possibly the fate of both species, hinged on what happened next. Next on what happened in the command ship. As they approached Zorak's vessel, a blinding flash illuminated the cockpit. A massive explosion rocked their shuttle, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. "We've been hit," Kevin shouted, wrestling with the controls. "Shields are down!" Cleo's fingers flew over the command console. "Engines failing! We're losing altitude fast!" The shuttle plummeted through Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire and debris. Kevin fought to stabilize their descent, but it was clear they were going down. As the ground rushed up to meet them, he made a split-second decision. "Brace for impact," he yelled, angling the shuttle towards the moon's surface. "We're going to crash." The impact was jarring, metal screeching as the shuttle skidded across the lunar landscape. When the dust settled, Kevin and Cleo found themselves alive but trapped in a crumpled escape pod. Kevin coughed, tasting blood. "Cleo, you okay?" She nodded weakly, wincing as she moved. "Alive? But we're in trouble." A quick assessment confirmed their dire situation. The pod's life support systems were failing, and their oxygen supply was limited. Kevin forced open the damaged hatch, and they stumbled out onto the moon's surface. The stark, crater-pocked landscape stretched out before them, bathed in the harsh light of the distant sun. Earth hung in the sky, a blue marble marred by flashes of orbital combat. "We need shelter," Cleo said, her voice distorted through the comm link in her spacesuit. "And a way to boost our distress signal." Kevin scanned the horizon, his heart sinking. Then he spotted something, a glint of metal in the distance. "Look, some kind of structure." They set off across the lunar surface, their movements awkward in the low gravity. Each step sent up plumes of moon dust, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by their labored breathing. As they drew closer, the structure revealed itself to be an abandoned outpost. Its domed shape and mix of human and Acamarian architecture spoke of a time before the war, when cooperation had seemed possible. "I remember this place," Cleo said, her voice tinged with wonder. "It was one of the first joint projects between our peoples, before everything fell apart." They entered through an airlock, relief washing over them as they removed their helmets. The outpost was dark and cold, but intact. Kevin found a control panel and began working to restore power. "If we can get the systems online," he said, "we might be able to survive long enough for rescue." Cleo joined him, her knowledge of Acamarian technology complementing his human engineering skills. Together, they coaxed the outpost back to life. Lights flickered on, and the hum of life support systems filled the air. As they explored the outpost, they discovered an old data center. Cleo's eyes widened as she accessed the terminals. "Kevin, look at this. These files. They contain detailed information about both our military capabilities. And there's more, records of peace negotiations that were sabotaged." Kevin leaned in, scanning the data. "This could change everything. If we can get this information back to Earth." Their work was interrupted by a distant rumble. Through the outpost viewports, they saw a sleek Acamarian shuttle touching down nearby. "Scouts," Cleo whispered. "They must be looking for debris from our crash." Kevin's mind raced. "We need to defend this position. It's our only chance of survival and getting this information out." They quickly formulated a plan, using their knowledge of the outpost to set traps and create defensive positions. As the Acamarian scouts approached, Kevin and Cleo prepared for a fight that would determine not just their fate, but potentially the course of the war. The first scout entered the airlock, weapon drawn. Kevin held his breath, finger on the trigger of a makeshift weapon cobbled together from outpost equipment. Beside him, Cleo tensed, ready to spring their first trap. The battle for the lunar outpost was about to begin, and with it, a chance to change the course of history. The battle for the lunar outpost began in earnest as the first Acamarian scout stepped through the airlock. Kevin squeezed the trigger of his improvised weapon, sending a burst of energy towards the intruder. The scout stumbled back, caught off guard by the unexpected resistance. Cleo activated their first trap, a repurposed gravity generator that sent the scout floating helplessly towards the ceiling. Kevin quickly dispatched the disoriented Acamarian with a well-aimed shot. "One down," Kevin muttered, his eyes fixed on the airlock. More scouts poured in, their weapons blazing. Kevin and Cleo worked in perfect sync, using their knowledge of the outpost to outmaneuver their attackers. They led the Aximarians through a maze of corridors, triggering traps and ambushing them at every turn. As the fight wore on, their resources dwindled. Kevin's makeshift weapon sputtered and died, forcing him to resort to hand-to-hand combat. Cleo's agility in the low gravity proved invaluable as she ducked and weaved through enemy fire. The final scout fell to a clever combination of Cleo's technical skills and Kevin's tactical thinking. They had rigged the outpost's power systems to overload, creating a localized EMP that disabled the scout's weapon and life support systems. Exhausted and battered, Kevin and Cleo leaned against a wall, catching their breath. The silence that followed the intense battle was almost deafening. "We did it," Cleo said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Kevin nodded, wincing as he examined a burn on his arm. "But at what cost? We've used up most of our supplies and energy reserves." As they took stock of their situation, Cleo noticed something odd about the wall panel behind them. "Kevin, look at this. The dimensions don't match up with the outpost schematics." Intrigued, they examined the panel more closely. Kevin found a hidden latch, and with a grunt of effort, he pulled the panel aside to reveal a secret chamber. The room was small but packed with advanced technology. At its center stood a sleek communications array, unlike anything they had seen before. "This must have been a top-secret addition," Cleo said, her eyes wide as she took in the equipment. "A joint project between our species that was never officially documented." Kevin moved to the main console, his fingers flying over the controls. "If we can get this operational, we might be able to boost our distress signal significantly." They worked tirelessly, combining Kevin's engineering skills with Cleo's knowledge of Aximarian technology. Hours passed as they repaired damaged circuits and realigned communication arrays. Finally, with a hum of energy, the system came to life. The main screen lit up, displaying a dizzying array of communication channels and frequencies. "We did it!" Kevin exclaimed, allowing himself a moment of triumph. Cleo nodded, her expression serious. "Now we just have to hope someone's listening." As they fine-tuned the signal, they intercepted fragmented transmissions from Earth. The news was grim. Zorak's forces were preparing for a massive assault on the human-resistant stronghold. "We need to do more than just call for help," Kevin said, his mind racing. "We have to use this technology to turn the tide of the battle." Cleo's eyes lit up with an idea. "The outpost's long-range sensors. If we can tie them into this communication system, we might be able to provide tactical information to the human forces." Kevin grinned. "And I bet we could use this to hack into the Aximarian battle network, 'cause a little chaos in Zorak's ranks." They set to work, pushing the hybrid technology to its limits. Kevin focused on enhancing the sensor data, creating detailed maps of Zorak's fleet formations and identifying potential weaknesses. Meanwhile, Cleo delved into the Aximarian network, planting false orders and disrupting communication channels. As they worked, they monitored the battle unfolding in Earth's orbit. Commander Chen's preemptive strike had caught Zorak off guard, but the sheer number of Aximarian ships threatened to overwhelm the human defenses. "Transmitting tactical data now," Kevin said, sending a burst of information to the human fleet. Almost immediately, they saw the impact of their efforts. Human ships began to maneuver with newfound precision, exploiting gaps in the Aximarian formation that they couldn't have known about otherwise. Cleo's fingers danced across her console. "Zorak's flagship is experiencing a malfunction in their targeting systems," she said with a sly smile, "and half of his support ships just received orders to fall back for no apparent reason." The battle in orbit began to shift. Human forces, bolstered by the tactical advantage provided by the lunar outpost, started to gain the upper hand. Zorak's once-coordinated assault devolved into chaos as conflicting orders and system failures plagued their fleet. As Kevin and Cleo watched the tide of battle turn, a new alert flashed on their screen. A small ship was approaching the moon at high speed, evading Aximarian patrols with surprising agility. "It's one of ours," Kevin said, studying the ship's signature. "A rescue team?" Before they could celebrate, another alert sounded. A group of Aximarian reinforcements had broken off from the main battle and were heading towards the moon. "They must have traced our signal," Cleo said, her voice tense. Kevin's mind raced as he assessed their options. We need to buy time for our rescuers to reach us. He turned to the outpost's old defense systems, hastily reactivating dormant protocols. With a series of commands, he launched a barrage of decoy signals, creating the illusion of multiple outposts scattered across the lunar surface. The Akamarian ships slowed their approach, clearly confused by the conflicting data. This hesitation was all the human rescue team needed. Their ships streaked across the lunar sky, touching down a short distance from the outpost. As the rescue team rushed towards them, Kevin and Cleo gathered the critical data they had discovered. The outpost shuddered as the first Akamarian shots found their mark. "Time to go," Kevin said, grabbing Cleo's hand. They ran towards the airlock, the rescue team now visible in their environmental suits. As they prepared to make their dash across the lunar surface, the outpost rocked with another explosion. The final stretch to safety lay before them, but with Akamarian forces closing in and the rescue shuttle waiting, Kevin and Cleo knew their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The fate of two worlds rested on their shoulders as they stepped out onto the moon's dusty surface, the Earth hanging in the sky above them, a reminder of everything at stake. Stake at hand, Kevin and Cleo raced towards the waiting rescue shuttle. Lunar dust billowed around their feet as they sprinted across the crater-pocked surface, the Earth looming large in the inky sky above. The shuttle's engines roared to life as they approached, its hull already pockmarked with scorch marks from Akamarian fire. Dr. Hawkins stood in the open hatchway, urgently waving them in. "Move it," he shouted through the comm link. "We've got multiple bogies inbound." Kevin and Cleo leapt into the shuttle, the hatch sealing behind them with a pressurized hiss. The craft lurched skyward, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire that scorched the ground where they had stood moments before. As they strapped themselves in, the shuttle shuddered violently, alarms blaring throughout the cabin. Dr. Hawkins's fingers flew over the control panel, his face grim. "Stealth systems are failing," he announced. "We took more damage than expected during the extraction." Kevin's mind raced. "We need to plot a course through the battle zone. I can use my knowledge of human tactics to predict safe corridors." Cleo nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "And I can anticipate Akamarian ship formations. Together, we might have a chance." They huddled around the navigation console, Kevin and Cleo calling out instructions as Dr. Hawkins skillfully piloted the craft. The shuttle weaved through the chaos of the space battle, narrowly avoiding collisions and weapons fire. A massive explosion rocked the ship, sending them sprawling. As Kevin pulled himself up, he noticed a flashing alert on the communications panel. "Wait," he said, reaching for the controls. "I'm picking up a transmission from Zorak's flagship." The shuttle fell silent as the message played. Zorak's gravelly voice filled the cabin, detailing plans for a weapon of unimaginable power, one capable of rendering Earth uninhabitable for both humans and Akamarians. Cleo's face paled. "We have to warn Commander Chen. This changes everything." As they neared Earth's atmosphere, warning lights flashed across the control panel. The shuttle groaned ominously, the hull creaking under the strain of their high-speed maneuvers. "We're losing structural integrity," Dr. Hawkins shouted over the din. "We can't maintain this trajectory." Kevin and Cleo exchanged a look of unyielding commitment. "We need to find a safe crash site," Kevin said, scanning the topographical data. "There, that forest near the secondary command center. It's our best shot." Cleo nodded, already calculating entry vectors. "I'll guide us in. Kevin, prepare for emergency protocols." The shuttle entered the atmosphere in a ball of fire, hurtling towards the dense canopy below. Trees snapped like twigs as they plowed through the forest, finally skidding to a halt in a clearing. Smoke filled the cabin as Kevin struggled to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs. "Everyone out!" he shouted, helping Dr. Hawkins from his seat. Cleo was already moving, her Akamarian strength allowing her to easily shift debris blocking the exit. They stumbled from the wreckage, the forest around them eerily quiet in the wake of their violent arrival. As Kevin took stock of their situation, a twig snapped in the underbrush. He whirled around, heart pounding, to see a patrol of Zorak's ground forces emerging from the trees. "Take cover!" he yelled, diving behind the shuttle's twisted hull. The air erupted with weapons fire. Kevin's mind shifted into combat mode, years of resistance fighting kicking in. He gestured to Dr. Hawkins and the crew, silently directing them to flank the enemy. Beside him, Cleo moved with fluid grace, her eyes scanning the Acamarian soldiers. "There," she whispered, pointing to a barely visible implant at the base of their necks. "That's their weak point." Kevin nodded, relaying the information to the others. They worked in tandem, Kevin's guerrilla tactics complementing Cleo's insider knowledge. One by one, the enemy soldiers fell. As the firefight intensified, Kevin found himself cornered by a particularly tenacious Acamarian. The alien loomed over him, weapon raised for the killing blow. Time seemed to slow as Kevin braced for the end. Suddenly, the Acamarian froze, its eyes going wide with confusion. It dropped its weapon, clutching its head in apparent agony before collapsing to the ground. Kevin looked up to see Cleo standing nearby, her face a mask of concentration. I'm not sure how I did that," she said, her voice shaky. "I just knew I had to stop him." Before they could process this new development, a burst of static came from the communicator they'd salvaged from the shuttle. Commander Chen's voice cut through the noise, her tone grave. "All forces, fall back. Zorak has broken through our last line of defense. I repeat, fall back. The war is lost." Kevin and Cleo locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. "We can't give up," Kevin said, his voice firm. "Not when we're so close." Cleo nodded, her expression resolute. "My new ability, combined with the data from the lunar outpost, we might have a chance to turn this around." As they hurried towards the resistance base, Kevin outlined their daring plan. Cleo would use her newfound telepathic powers to infiltrate Zorak's neural network, while Kevin would use the outpost data to sow chaos in the Acamarian fleet. The forest gave way to the outskirts of the resistance base, a flurry of activity as evacuation procedures were already underway. As they approached, weapons were immediately trained on Cleo. Kevin stepped in front of her, his voice ringing out with authority. "Stand down. We need to see Commander Chen immediately. We have information that could save us all." The soldiers hesitated, clearly torn between their orders and the urgency in Kevin's voice. Finally, a grizzled sergeant stepped forward. "Follow me," he growled. "But no funny business from the Acamarian, or we'll shoot first and ask questions later." As they were led into the heart of the base, Kevin felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. He glanced at Cleo, seeing his own mix of fear and drive mirrored in her eyes. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The fate of two worlds resting squarely on their shoulders. Shoulders. They had come too far to fail now. Commander Chen's eyes narrowed as Kevin and Cleo were led into the command center. The room buzzed with frantic activity as personnel rushed to coordinate the ongoing evacuation. "This had better be good," Chen said, her voice sharp with tension. "We're running out of time." Kevin stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "Commander, we have critical intelligence that could turn the tide of this war." As Kevin and Cleo laid out their findings from the lunar outpost, including the true origins of the conflict and Zorak's planet-destroying weapon, Chen's skepticism gave way to grim understanding. "If what you're saying is true," she said, studying the data on a nearby screen, "we might have one last shot at ending this." Kevin nodded. "We need to strike now before Zorak can activate that weapon." Chen's fingers flew over a console, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's orbit. "I'm authorizing a three-pronged assault. Kevin, you'll lead a strike team to infiltrate Zorak's flagship and disable that weapon." Kevin's pulse quickened at the thought of the dangerous mission ahead, but he nodded resolutely. Chen turned to Cleo. "You'll work with Dr. Hawkins to amplify your telepathic abilities. If you can disrupt the Acamarian battle network, it could give us the edge we need." Cleo's eyes widened slightly, but she steeled herself and agreed. "Meanwhile," Chen continued, "I'll lead our remaining forces in a final assault on Zorak's fleet." As the room erupted into a flurry of preparations, Kevin pulled Cleo aside. They found a quiet corner amidst the chaos, their eyes meeting with a mixture of fear and purpose. "Cleo, Kevin began, his voice catching. She placed a hand on his cheek, her touch gentle despite the urgency of the moment. "I know," she said softly. "Whatever happens, we've come this far together." Their lips met in a desperate kiss, conveying all the words left unspoken between them. The moment was shattered by the blaring of alarms throughout the base. "Zorak's forces are approaching!" a voice called out over the commotion. Kevin and Cleo broke apart, their expressions hardening with determination. "Let's finish this," Kevin said. Minutes later, Kevin found himself strapped into a stealth shuttle with his strike team, the engines humming to life as they prepared to launch. Through the view screen, he watched as Cleo was connected to an array of experimental equipment, wires and sensors covering her slender frame. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the chaos of battle already unfolding in the skies above. Kevin gripped the controls tightly as they shot forward, weaving through debris and weapons fire. Using his knowledge of Akamarian ship design, Kevin guided the shuttle through a weak point in the flagship's defenses. They touched down in a rarely used maintenance bay, the team moving swiftly to secure the area. "Move out," Kevin ordered, leading the way through the winding corridors of the massive ship. As they fought their way deeper into the vessel, Kevin's mind raced with thoughts of Cleo. He could only imagine the strain she must be under as she attempted to disrupt the entire Akamarian battle network. Back at the human base, Cleo gritted her teeth against the searing pain in her head. She pushed her consciousness outward, feeling the vast network of Akamarian minds spread out before her. "Steady," Dr. Hawkins murmured, monitoring her vital signs closely. "You're doing great, Cleo. Just a little more." Cleo focused her thoughts, sending waves of confusion and disorientation through the enemy fleet. Akamarian ships began to list aimlessly, their coordinated assault falling into disarray. In orbit, Commander Chen watched with a mixture of hope and disbelief as the enemy fleet began to falter. "All units, press the attack," she ordered, seizing the moment of opportunity. Human fighters surged forward, tearing into the disorganized Akamarian forces. Explosions bloomed silently in the void of space as ship after ship fell to the renewed assault. On Zorak's flagship, Kevin's team fought their way through increasingly heavy resistance. The halls echoed with the sound of weapons fire and the cries of wounded Akamarians. "We're close to the weapon control center," Kevin called out, checking a schematic on his wrist computer. "One more level." As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a squad of Zorak's elite guards. The air filled with searing energy bolts as both sides opened fire. Kevin dove for cover, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. He spotted a weakness in the guards' formation and signaled to his team. They moved as one, executing a perfectly coordinated assault that left the enemy reeling. With a final push, they breached the doors of the weapon control center. Kevin's heart pounded as he took in the massive array of alien technology before him. Somewhere in this room was the key to disabling Zorak's planet-destroying weapon. As his team secured the perimeter, Kevin's communicator crackled to life. Dr. Hawkins' voice came through, tense and urgent. "Kevin, we have a problem. Cleo's mental state is deteriorating rapidly. If she keeps this up, she could fall into a coma or worse." Kevin's blood ran cold at the news. He glanced at the complex system surrounding him, knowing that disabling the weapon could take precious time they might not have. In that moment, Kevin realized that victory wouldn't come through military might alone. The key to ending this conflict lay in bridging the gap between humans and Akamarians. "Dr. Hawkins," Kevin said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest, "I need you to patch Cleo directly into the flagship's communication systems. We're going to broadcast her message to both fleets simultaneously." As Kevin worked feverishly to establish the connection, he could only hope that Cleo had the strength for one final push. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of destruction or a new era of peace. Understanding or a new era of cooperation. With trembling hands, Kevin activated the ship-wide broadcast system. "Cleo," he said, his voice hoarse with urgency, "it's time. Show them the truth." Back on Earth, Cleo's body tensed as she channeled every ounce of her remaining strength into a final, desperate push. Her consciousness expanded, reaching out to touch the minds of every Akamarian in the fleet. Through their shared neural network, she projected a vivid tapestry of memories and emotions, the true history of their species, the manipulations of Zorak, and the potential for peace between their two races. As Cleo's message spread, the tide of battle began to shift. Akamarian ships ceased fire, their crews thrown into confusion and doubt. Kevin watched through the flagship's view screens as the chaos unfolded, a glimmer of hope rising in his chest. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. A searing pain shot through Kevin's side as an energy bolt struck him, fired by a lone Akamarian guard who had slipped into the control room. Kevin stumbled, his vision blurring, as he fought to stay conscious. With the last of his strength, he lunged for the weapon controls, smacking his palm down on the emergency shutdown sequence. The ship shuddered as the planet-destroying weapon powered down, its energy core going dark. Kevin allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction before collapsing to the floor, blood seeping from his wound. On Earth, Dr. Hawkins watched in horror as Cleo's vital signs began to plummet. "She's pushing herself too hard," she shouted to the medical team surrounding them. "We need to pull her out now." But Cleo's mind was too far gone, lost in the vast network of Akamarian consciousness. Her body convulsed as neural overload threatened to shut down her brain entirely. In orbit, Commander Chen's voice crackled over the comms, filled with a mix of triumph and urgency. "The enemy fleet is in disarray. All units, press the attack. We're boarding Zorak's flagship now." Chen led the charge onto the massive Akamarian vessel, her team cutting through the scattered resistance with practiced efficiency. As they fought their way towards the bridge, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The opposition they faced was too disorganized, too easy to overcome. Her suspicions were confirmed as they breached the final security door, revealing the bridge in a state of chaos. Akamarian crew members were locked in heated arguments, some even coming to blows with one another. And there, in the center of it all, stood Zorak, his face a mask of fury and desperation. "It's over, Zorak," Chen called out, her weapon trained on the Akamarian leader. "Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." Zorak's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile playing across his alien features. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "I'll see this ship and everyone on it reduced to atoms before I allow that to happen." With lightning speed, Zorak lunged for a nearby control panel. Chen fired, but the energy bolt went wide as an Akamarian officer tackled her. In the ensuing struggle, Zorak managed to input a series of commands. Alarms blared throughout the ship as a computerized voice announced, "Self-destruct sequence initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." Chen's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. If Zorak's flagship exploded here, in the heart of the battle, it would take out a significant portion of both fleets, potentially reigniting the conflict in an instant. As Chen fought to subdue the Akamarian officer, her mind raced. They needed to stop that self-destruct sequence. But how? And where was Kevin? Back in the weapon control center, Kevin drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain from his wound threatening to overwhelm him. Suddenly, he felt a familiar presence in his mind. Cleo. "Kevin," her voice echoed in his thoughts, weak but determined. "I can't hold on much longer, but I can help you one last time." Through their mental link, Kevin saw flashes of Akamarian ship schematics, complex technological systems he'd never encountered before. He realized with a start that Cleo was sharing her knowledge with him, knowledge that could be the key to stopping the self-destruct sequence. "The power core," Kevin mumbled, forcing himself to his feet. "Have to get to the engine room." Each step was agony as Kevin stumbled through the corridors of the massive ship. Explosions rocked the vessel as Chen's forces engaged the remaining loyal Akamarians. But Kevin pressed on, guided by Cleo's knowledge and his own iron will. On the bridge, Chen finally gained the upper hand, knocking out the Akamarian officer with a well-placed strike. She turned to find Zorak attempting to access an escape pod. "Oh, no, you don't," Chen growled, launching herself at the Akamarian leader. The two collided in a furious whirlwind of fists and feet. Zorak's superior strength gave him an edge, but Chen's years of combat experience allowed her to hold her own. They traded blows, neither willing to give an inch as the ship shuddered around them. In the engine room, Kevin finally reached the massive power core. His vision swam as he fought to stay conscious, Cleo's knowledge guiding his hands as he began the complex shutdown procedure. "Come on," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. "Just a little more." On the bridge, Chen finally managed to get Zorak in a chokehold. The Akamarian leader thrashed wildly, but Chen held firm, slowly cutting off his air supply until he went limp in her arms. "This is Commander Chen," she gasped into her comm unit as she secured Zorak's unconscious form. "The bridge is secure. Zorak is in custody. All units, begin evacuation procedures immediately." As Chen's forces began to pull out, taking both human and Akamarian prisoners with them, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were forgetting something crucial. In the engine room, Kevin's fingers flew over the alien controls, his mind a whirlwind of Akamarian technical knowledge and human intuition. With a final, desperate push, he input the last command sequence. The power core's ominous hum began to fade, the pulsing energy field surrounding it flickering and dying. Kevin allowed himself a small smile of triumph before the extent of his injuries finally caught up with him. He collapsed to the floor, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. As consciousness slipped away, Kevin felt a gentle touch on his mind. Cleo, her presence fading, but still there, a comforting warmth in the encroaching void. "We did it," he thought, hoping she could hear him. "We saved them all." Then the darkness took him, and Kevin knew no more. On Earth, Dr. Hawkins watched in horror as Cleo's body went completely still, her vital signs flatlined into a terrifying straight line. "No, no, no," Hawkins muttered, her hands flying over the medical equipment. "Don't you dare give up now, Cleo. Not when we're so close." As the doctor fought to stabilize her patient, a faint signal caught her attention, a neural pattern unlike anything she'd seen before. It was as if Cleo's consciousness was somewhere else. In orbit, Commander Chen's voice rang out over the comms, tinged with urgency and a hint of fear. "All units, be advised. We have a man down on the Akamarian flagship. Repeat, Kevin is still on board and unaccounted for. I need a volunteer team for immediate extraction." As Chen's words echoed through the fleet, a strange thing happened. Akamarian ships, their crews no longer under Zorak's thrall, began to move alongside human vessels. A joint rescue team was forming, ready to plunge back into the damaged flagship on a desperate mission to save the man who had helped bring them all together. The battle was over, but the real struggle was just beginning. As human and Akamarian ships maneuvered into position for the rescue operation, the future of both species hung in the balance, along with the lives of the two individuals who had made it all possible. The joint human-Akamarian rescue team moved swiftly through the damaged corridors of Zorak's flagship, their steps echoing in the eerie silence. Commander Chen led the charge, her face set with dedication as they searched for Kevin. They found him in the engine room, unconscious and barely breathing. Chen's heart clenched at the sight of his pale face and the pool of blood beneath him. "We need immediate medical evacuation," she barked into her comm unit. "Prep the medical bay for emergency surgery." As they rushed Kevin to the waiting shuttle, Chen couldn't help but marvel at the sight of human and Akamarian medics working side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a common goal. Back on Earth, Dr. Hawkins fought her own battle to save Cleo. The young woman's vital signs had stabilized, but her mind remained trapped in a coma-like state. Hawkins knew that every second counted. "We're losing her," she muttered, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Come on, Cleo! Fight!" In an audacious attempt, Hawkins initiated a risky neural synchronization procedure, hoping to use the lingering connection between Cleo and Kevin to anchor her consciousness. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Kevin and Cleo were rushed to a hastily assembled joint medical facility, where human and Akamarian medical teams worked tirelessly to save their lives. Dr. Hawkins found herself at the center of it all, coordinating the efforts of both species' medical experts. She marveled at the Akamarians' advanced biotechnology, even as she shared human medical techniques that were new to them. "Their physiology is so different," an Akamarian doctor named Zarel observed, his multifaceted eyes fixed on Kevin's vital signs. "Yet, in many ways, so similar." Hawkins nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips, despite the gravity of the situation. "I suppose that's true of more than just our bodies." Days turned into weeks, and still Kevin and Cleo remained in critical condition. The medical facility became a symbol of the fledgling alliance between humans and Akamarians, with members of both species holding vigil outside. Commander Chen visited often, her usual stern demeanor softened by concern for her friend and comrade. She found herself deep in conversation with Akamarian military leaders, sharing stories of Kevin's bravery and discussing the potential for future cooperation. It was during one of these visits, nearly 3 weeks after the battle, that Kevin finally opened his eyes. Where? He croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chen was at his side in an instant, relief flooding her features. Easy, soldier. You're safe. We won. Kevin's eyes widened as memories flooded back. Cleo? He asked urgently. Chen's expression tightened. She's alive, but... She trailed off, unsure how to explain Cleo's condition. As Kevin regained his strength over the following days, he spent every moment he could by Cleo's bedside. He talked to her for hours, sharing stories of his recovery and the incredible changes taking place outside. You should see it, Cleo, he said softly, his hand gently squeezing hers. Humans and Akamarians working together, learning from each other. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Dr. Hawkins watched from the doorway, her heart aching at the sight. She cleared her throat softly, drawing Kevin's attention. We think we found a way to bring her back, she said, her voice filled with cautious hope. But it's risky, and we'll need your help. Kevin straightened, his eyes blazing with commitment. Whatever it takes, he said firmly. The procedure was unlike anything either species had attempted before. Kevin lay on a bed next to Cleo, their hands clasped tightly as Dr. Hawkins and Zar-El prepared the complex array of human and Akamarian medical equipment. Remember, Hawkins said, her voice tense, you're the anchor. Find her in there and bring her home. Kevin nodded, his eyes locked on Cleo's peaceful face as the sedative took hold, and he felt himself slipping into darkness. He found himself in a vast, swirling landscape of thoughts and memories. Fragments of Cleo's experiences with the Akamarian consciousness floated past, tantalizing glimpses of an alien perspective that took his breath away. For what felt like hours, Kevin searched, calling out to Cleo with his mind. Just as exhaustion began to set in, he felt a faint response, a flicker of familiar warmth in the chaos. With renewed energy, Kevin pushed forward, following the tenuous connection. Gradually, the mental landscape began to coalesce, taking on more defined shapes and colors. And there she was. Cleo stood in the center of a swirling vortex of memories, her form ethereal and shifting. Kevin reached out, his hand passing through her insubstantial form. Cleo, he called, pouring all of his emotion into the word. It's time to come home. Cleo's eyes focused on him, recognition dawning in their depths. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. As they touched, a surge of energy pulsed through them both. In the medical facility, alarms blared as Cleo's vital signs spiked. Dr. Hawkins and Zar-El worked furiously to stabilize both patients, their hands flying over the controls. Come on, Hawkins muttered, her eyes fixed on the neural activity readouts. You can do this. In the mental landscape, Kevin felt Cleo's presence growing stronger. Her form solidified, becoming more real with each passing moment. He grasped her hand tightly, feeling the warmth of her touch for the first time in weeks. Let's go home, he said softly, smiling at her. Together they turned towards the growing light, leaving the swirling chaos behind. As they stepped forward, the world around them began to fade. Kevin's eyes snapped open, his heart racing. He turned his head, hardly daring to hope. Beside him, Cleo's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Kevin, she whispered, her voice weak but full of warmth. Tears of joy streamed down Kevin's face as he squeezed her hand. Welcome back, he said softly. As news of Cleo's recovery spread, a wave of celebration swept through the medical facility. Humans and Akamarians alike rejoiced, the shared emotion bridging the gap between their species in a way that no treaty ever could. In the days that followed, Kevin and Cleo became living symbols of the new alliance. Their story of sacrifice, perseverance, and the power of connection inspired both species to reach out to one another, to find common ground where before they had seen only differences. As they recovered, Kevin and Cleo found themselves at the center of the ongoing peace negotiations. Their unique perspectives and shared experiences made them invaluable in bridging the cultural divide. One evening, as they sat together on a balcony overlooking the bustling medical complex, Kevin turned to Cleo, his eyes filled with a mix of wonder and willpower. "We've come so far," he said softly, taking her hand in his. "But there's still so much to do." Cleo nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the first stars were beginning to appear. "We've been given a second chance," she replied, "a chance to build something truly remarkable." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the scene, Kevin and Cleo sat in comfortable silence, their fingers intertwined. The challenges ahead were many, but in that moment, with the promise of a new dawn on the horizon, anything seemed possible.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.